What's up everyone, welcome to the channel, and today I'm going to be giving you my full card predictions and betting breakdown for UFC 298. Let's start out with the first fight of the card, which is Andrea Lee versus Miranda Maverick. In this matchup, I'm going with Miranda Maverick. She's the younger fighter at the age of 26 years old, entering into her athletic prime, whereas Andrea Lee is 35 years old. If anything, she's probably on the athletic decline, and also she's been taken down multiple times throughout her career by multiple fighters. To name a few, we got Macy Barber, Viviane Araujo, Joanne Wood, Montana De La Rosa, and a couple others, Roxanne Modafferi is what I meant to say there. But ultimately, Miranda Maverick has some solid takedowns. She has some solid cardio. I do see her finding the takedowns and winning a very competitive decision. When it is on the feet, Andrea Lee should be the more technical striker. She is the more experienced vet, has taken on the higher levels of competition. But still, I'm going to be going with the young Miranda Maverick, who has lost throughout her career before. But I do think at this age, she should be making rapid improvements. So 29-28, very competitive decision is the pick. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Val Woodburn versus Oban Elliott. In this matchup, I'm taking Oban Elliott. He's the more well-rounded guy. He has some very solid cardio, probably the better cardio out of the two. And he has a pretty solid chin. I know he was hit a lot in the Contender Series. He was hurt at times, so people immediately want to go with Val Woodburn, who has some solid takedown defense and some very solid power. And they see Oban getting hit, and they think, oh, this guy sucks and this and that. But he did dog his way to a decision. He is very, very tough. Will never give up on himself, and I do like that in this matchup. If he's not getting flatlined, he'll be working nonstop, shooting takedowns, just running around on the feet, trying not to get KO'd. And yes, he does get hit at times, but I do think that, well, Val Woodburn is a very slow and kind of a plotty striker. Maybe he stuffs the takedowns, but on the feet, I'm not too high on his technical abilities. Neither am I on Oban Elliott, but he might even be the more technical striker here. I think he can find the takedowns. He's got the better submission game, more well-rounded, pretty tough. And on the Contender Series, he actually beat a very solid opponent in Kayik Brito, who is a guy that actually KO'd Robert Brycek. If you don't know who Robert Brycek is, he's a guy that fought last weekend on the UFC Fight Night Jack Hermanson versus Joe Pyfer card, and he survived Ihor Potieria for 3 rounds. And Ihor Potieria is a guy that hits pretty hard for the light heavyweight division. He was dropped in round 3 and was able to recover. And he KO'd Robert Brycek with a jab and then followed up and obviously TKO'd him there. But that shows you how much power Kayik Brito has, and he wasn't able to finish Oban Elliott even when Oban Elliott was dropped. I think Oban is underratedly very tough. He's got some very solid cardio, more well-rounded, as I said. I'm going to say a 30-27 decision. He makes it look pretty easy. Val Woodburn might have a moment or two, and if he does, that could be the fight. He probably finds a KO early, and that's his only chance to win. But, hey, I've been wrong before. Maybe he somehow wins by decision by doing more damage on the feet. I just don't see him stuffing every takedown or having that much success on the feet. I think Oban Elliott knows who Val Woodburn is. Even just by looking at Val Woodburn, you could probably predict what type of style this guy has. It's that he's going to try and come at you and knock you out. But Oban Elliott is the pick. 30-27, that's going to be the pick. Let's move on to the next part of the card. We got Josh Quinlan versus Danny Barlow. I'm taking Danny Barlow, but I'm not as high on him in this matchup as I feel like a lot of people are. I think people are saying all week, Danny Barlow is this great, fantastic prospect. He's good. He's not as good as people are saying. They're making him seem like he's the next coming of Jesus Christ himself, and I don't think that is the case. Danny Barlow, sure, great power. The nickname is awesome, left hand to God, and that straight left hand is fantastic. He's got a massive reach advantage here, which was something that I wasn't really expecting. I knew he was taller, but an 80-inch reach for a guy that's 6'2" is pretty crazy. Trey Waters, the guy that fought Josh Quinlan in his last fight, had a 70-inch reach, so he has a bigger reach advantage. And he does have a pretty similar style to Trey Waters in that he'll rip teeps to the body. Maybe not exactly, because he rips more low kicks and a lot more head kicks, but he's got some nice hands, uses straight punches very well like Trey Waters. Doesn't roll with punches the way that Trey Waters does, and maybe that will be what ends up getting Danny Barlow caught. But Danny Barlow has been to decisions before. He's fought at kind of slower paces, does like to pick his shots, doesn't like to push the same type of pace that maybe Trey Waters did in their fight, and Trey Waters might be a little bit better at countering than Danny Barlow, but I do think Danny Barlow is technical enough to keep Josh Quinlan at range, especially with that teep to the body. It's going to be money. His low kicks will be money, and Josh Quinlan is just not a very technical striker. I know Josh Quinlan is a BJJ black belt, and if he finds the takedowns, he can probably submit Danny Barlow, who was nearly submitted on the regional scene by a guy named Dustin. I don't remember the guy's last name, but if you go back and rewatch that fight, in the first round, the choke was in, and then Danny made an adjustment, peeled his hand off. But if that's a better grappler like a Josh Quinlan, he is subbing you. I think if Josh Quinlan gets a takedowns, he finds a submission. I just don't think Josh Quinlan's takedowns are that good. 7 out of 8 of them were stuffed by Trey Waters, who was taken down and submitted in the first round by one of the Bonfim brothers. I don't know if it was Gabriel or Ishmael, but Josh Quinlan on the feet, not very technical. He's going to look for the knockout, but I do think with a rangy striker that has a power threat, which Danny Barlow does, and he will be ripping that straight hand, and the straight punches will succeed against Josh Quinlan. He should be having success, and Danny Barlow has shown some solid takedown defense on the regional scene. Not the greatest, but I don't think you need the greatest takedown defense to beat Josh Quinlan. However, don't sleep on Josh Quinlan and load up on Danny Barlow just because he's looked good against fighting cans. Both of these guys haven't fought really good opponents. When Josh Quinlan fought a pretty good opponent in Trey Waters, he didn't look too good. Danny Barlow on the regional scene hasn't fought anyone good. I guess on the Contender Series, that Raheem Forrest win was pretty good. Raheem Forrest is a guy who's undefeated outside of fighting Charles Radke, who's in the UFC, just got a KO in the first round against Gilbert Urbina, and Danny Barlow, who also KO'd him in the first round. I think Danny Barlow is getting so much hype because he's a southpaw, and when the southpaw throws kicks, it looks beautiful. It's almost like lefties with any other sport in basketball or in football. The lefty quarterback looks really cool. A lefty shooting the basketball just looks cool. It's something new and aesthetically pleasing. I think since Danny Barlow is a southpaw, a lot of people are super high on him just because he throws some very nice kicks, has a beautiful straight left hand. And I'm not saying he can't be good. I just don't think he's as great of a prospect as people are making him out to be. I'm not sure he can push an insane pace for 3 rounds, and I think if anyone has a cardio advantage, it might actually be Josh Quinlan in this matchup. If Josh Quinlan is shooting in on takedowns nonstop, finding takedowns, initiating grappling exchanges, and just pressuring on the feet. But I don't think Josh Quinlan will do that. I think Danny Barlow, like I have mentioned, will keep him at range with his teep to the body, hinder Josh Quinlan's movement with leg kicks, and find something with that straight left hand at times. I'm going to pick him by decision because I don't think his power is as great as some of these other fantastic guys that I think it would take to knock out Josh Quinlan. And now that I mentioned that, it's kind of a weird point to bring up because Josh Quinlan hasn't been knocked out. But Josh Quinlan, a pretty durable guy, took shots from Trey Waters pretty damn well. I just don't think Danny Barlow has the greatest power in the world despite knocking out a lot of regional bumps. And that's the thing about the regional scene. There's a lot of plumbers, Costco employees out there that you can end up knocking out. So I'm not super high on his power, but I do think he can find a knockout, definitely. I'm just not going to bet on it here against a pretty fairly durable guy. That doesn't mean I don't think he has knockout power. I think he's got pretty solid knockout power, just not devastating knockout power. And for that reason, I think he's going to get it done by decision. But knockout equally as likely. I'd say a 25% chance he gets it done by knockout and probably like a 30% chance he gets it done by decision. I'm giving him like a 55% chance to win this one. Don't load up on him at -200 like I said. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Brenson Ribeiro versus Mingyang Zhang. Mingyang Zhang is fun. Very fun. And so is Brenson Ribeiro. This should be a first-round finish. I'm taking Brenson Ribeiro, but I'm not very confident. He is the underdog. But Mingyang Zhang, when I'm looking at his record, he's fighting bad fighters. And whatever organization he's fighting in is a joke. I haven't heard of it before. And Brenson Ribeiro sure hasn't fought in the most known organizations. He's kind of fought in a bunch of different organizations, but he's actually fought the champion at Brazil Chutobox. Oh my gosh, let me bring it up. At Brazil... Chuto Brazil, that's what it's called. I don't know why that took me so long, but he beat their champion, and I know it's a pretty decent promotion. I've actually heard of the promotion before, so that's a good sign. But some of these these organizations in China just have horrible competition. I can't stress this enough because there's certain guys I'm looking at with winning records, and I'm thinking, bro, this guy should be working at Costco. He should be working at Walmart respectfully. And there's a guy literally that was 1-4 and fought for a championship belt against Mingyang Zhang. I'm just telling you right now, anyone with a good record over in Asia and these Chinese organizations haven't proven anything. And Mingyang Zhang has lost a couple of times out there, been chinned a couple of times. I don't think he's faced anyone as good as Brenson Ribeiro. And Brenson Ribeiro is coming off a very impressive win over the Lopez guy. I don't remember his first name right now. Let me bring that up actually. His name was Bruno Lopez, who is a massive favorite over him. They pulled up that he was a Muay Thai black belt when I was watching that in the Contender Series today. He's beaten some very solid opponents, more solid opponents than Mingyang Zhang, and for that reason, I'm going to go with him. And then when you watch Mingyang Zhang's fight on the road to the UFC, sure, he knocked out that freaking slightly fat dude, George Tokos. That's who it was. But he was getting hit so damn much, and I don't think you can be getting hit like that against Brenson Ribeiro. Brenson Ribeiro lands fucking clean, or very powerfully, and I don't think Mingyang Zhang is going to be able to take too many punches from Brenson Ribeiro. And although Brenson Ribeiro does get hit, and he's been knocked out twice throughout his career, and Mingyang Zhang has been knocked out 3 times throughout his career, I think whoever lands first could potentially win this, but Brenson Ribeiro does have some technical ability. Mingyang Zhang rips the low kick, but so does Brunson Ribeiro. I'd argue he even does it a little bit better. And Brunson Ribeiro is pretty good at working in that jab, and he actually does have a pretty solid counter straight right. Mingyang Zhang has the quicker hands here, and that could be enough reasoning alone to pick him in this fight because he just might be the fighter to land first simply for the fact that he has the quicker hands. But I think that we've seen Brunson Ribeiro take some pretty solid shots on the fight for the Cejudo Brazil Championship. He got knocked down, he got hurt, he was getting put in very bad positions. I think he was full mounted, the ref was looking at stopping, and eventually he found a scramble and did find some big shots and found the TKO in round 1. He's dealt with adversity before and came back, took big shots from Bruno Lopez. I know he's been knocked out twice throughout his career, but he can take a fairly decent shot. I don't know too much about either one of these guys' cardio because if you go back and you look at their records, they haven't been to decision or many late rounds throughout their career. I imagine both of these guys don't have the greatest cardio as they both push such an insane pace early and go head hunting, and almost everything they throw is with 100% power. I'm really looking forward to this one. This should be a scrap. I'm expecting a first round finish, and I'm taking the underdog in Brunson Ribeiro, who also probably has the grappling advantage. We haven't seen too much of it, but if you look on the regional scene, he has initiated some grappling exchanges. They've both been submitted multiple times on the regional scene. I don't think they're super high-level fighters, but when it comes to these matchups where it's just a scrap, I think both of these guys can have success within the light heavyweight division, putting on very, very fun shows. So Brunson Ribeiro is the pick. I'm going to say round 1 KO. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Rinya Nakamura versus Carlos Vera. I'm taking Rinya Nakamura here. Carlos Vera, slick submissions. He trains with Ryan Hall, so maybe he finds a submission as Rinya Nakamura shooting in on a takedown. But I think Rinya is the much better wrestler, should be able to stay away from the submissions, and on the feet, he has very powerful and pretty slick hands for the most part. He'll go for it, and I think he goes for it here, and I think he finds a first-round knockout. If that's not the case, he probably shoots takedowns and beats this guy for 3 rounds. I'm going with either a 30-27 decision or a first-round KO. I'm going to say a first-round KO. I think he doesn't mind this being on the feet because Carlos Vera is not that high level of a striker. He's also a pretty old guy. I don't know why he is in the UFC. The fact that he didn't win TUF just should tell you that this isn't a very solid fighter because that wasn't a very good season of TUF in my opinion. And Rinya Nakamura seems like a very solid prospect. At minus 1,300, I'm going to tell you not to bet that, but if you do, I mean, you're doing it to yourself if he ends up losing. Minus 1,300 is kind of crazy, but Carlos Vera is not really a UFC caliber guy. So Rinya Nakamura, round 1 KO is the pick. He'll get it done dominantly. Pretty confident on that. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Marcos Rogerio de Lima versus Justin Tafa. I wanted to go with Justin Tafa, but you look at his record and he's losing to Jared Vandera. There's been other fights where he hasn't looked fantastic, and if he wins, he'll make it look fantastic. And I know he's knocked out Parker Porter, Austin Lane, and Austin Lane is a very big guy. But Marcos Rogerio de Lima, despite being 38 years old, which, fuck, I mean, that's not a good look. He's had success against some pretty solid heavyweights. He beat Waldo Cortez Acosta, submitted Andrea Arlovski in the first round. I mean, he's got some thud to his punches. He can work in some takedowns. Is he a BJJ black belt? Actually, I don't think so, but he's got some submissions to his name. He's got the better cardio of the two, and I think if he finds a takedown early, which I expect him to shoot early, I think he'll find it. And I know some people will say, well, Tafa stuffed some takedowns throughout his career, and you know, he talks about how takedown defense means a lot throughout his camps. Okay, fair enough, but his brother is another guy you can look at for takedown defense. He was taken down by Muhammad Usman, controlled for a lot. I don't know if this camp has the greatest takedown defense. And something about the heavyweight grapplers is just, I feel like the way that the weight is distributed, if they're shooting it on takedowns, they're a little bit more likely to get it. Marcos Rogerio de Lima has some nice low kicks. They will be there for him. He has some nice hooks. I do think if this is a purely striking matchup, I'm going with Justin Tafa 100 times out of 100. He would be the pick. But I expect Marcos Rogerio de Lima to shoot early. If he doesn't, he'll end up getting sparked out. And I could see Tafa stuffing the takedowns, but honestly, he's beaten nobody good so far in his career, so I just can't bet on that, whereas Marcos Rogerio de Lima has some fairly decent wins throughout his name, is the experienced vet, and I think he probably can evaluate the film of Justin Tafa and see that his only way to lose this is by a first round, potentially second round KO and getting clipped with a big shot. So he'll want to take this down to the ground. I think he'll smother him and actually find a submission in the later rounds. I'm going to say round 3 submission. I could also see a decision, but I could also see a round 1 KO from Justin Tafa. Marcos Rogerio de Lima is the pick. Round 3 submission, as I said. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Amanda Lemos versus Mackenzie Dern. Amanda Lemos is going to be the pick. She has some solid takedown defense. I know she was taken down multiple times by Zhang Weili and beaten up horribly. And it was not very very fun to watch. It just felt illegal watching that considering how bad Zhang Weili beat her up. She like over 10 times her strike, not even quadruple, more than that. I think she landed like 200 strikes on Amanda Lemos. And Amanda Lemos, whatever her fucking name is, isn't a very bad fighter. Like, she is a pretty solid striker. She's got some nice power. She has some nice submissions. She's beaten Jessica Andrade, who just ran through Mackenzie Dern. I think Amanda Lemos should be able to stuff the takedowns, and when it is on the feet, she is the more technical striker. She is the more powerful striker, and Mackenzie Dern is just not meant to strike. What worries me is Angela Hill, I thought beat this fucker on the feet, Amanda Lemos on the feet. I thought she should have won that fight, but that didn't end up happening. They gave the decision towards Amanda Lemos. And when you look at Mackenzie Dern, she's going out there and beating Angela Hill, having success on the feet, taking her down. But I think this is a different type of fight because Amanda Lemos is going to be improving. She's a pretty solid prospect. Actually, how old is she? I think she's actually fairly old. Yeah, she's 36 years old. Okay, so I take that back. Maybe not a prospect. Although she's 36 years old, she's got power. And I think that's enough to really make Mackenzie Dern not have success in this fight, and she will stuff the takedowns, and if it hits the ground, she's got better submission defense than some of the other fighters that Mackenzie Dern has been able to submit. But I do think that Amanda Lemos keeps us on the feet, finds big shots. I'm going to say decision, but Mackenzie Dern gets hurt multiple times, and I'm going to say 30-27 Amanda Lemos decision. You know, for -120, I don't mind this play, but something is making me feel very weird considering Amanda Lemos was like -270, and now it's damn near evens. So maybe this is one of those things where people are seeing things that I'm not, but I still don't think Mackenzie Dern's striking is that good, and I can't really trust her after that last matchup against Jessica Andrade. And although people have said this is the mini Andrade, I mean, Amanda Lemos is a little bit more technical. She's not going to go out there the same way that Jessica Andrade did, and maybe that type of style where you just go after Mackenzie Dern is just the worst style for Mackenzie Dern, but I think Amanda Lemos should be able to pick her apart on the feet, rip some low kicks, work in some power, just land some big shots, and Mackenzie Dern is hittable, and she will get hurt, and I think if she's getting hurt, she's not going to win the fight. And I don't think she finds a submission here. It's possible, but I'm not confident in Mackenzie Dern. Can't really be at this point in her career. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Anthony Hernandez versus Roman Kopylov. Everyone's on the Roman Kopylov side, and I understand. Roman Kopylov is a powerful striker, very, very fast body kicks. When it comes to the middleweight division, he is the fastest kicks in the entire division. Nice head kicks, nice body kicks. Doesn't rip the leg too much, but he can, and when he does, it's successful. He's got very powerful hands. He's a southpaw fighter. And he's a 5-time hand-to-hand combat sambo world champion. Not a lot of people are bringing that up. I don't know why. That's a very impressive thing to have to your resume. Everyone brings it up for Ikram Aliskerov, but not so much for Roman Kopylov. I mean, you can look it up. It is true. It's not as well known, but he's also a master in combat sambo, combat something like that, but he's a master in a couple of sports. This guy's a very high-level striker. With that being said, I'm picking Anthony Hernandez. I think Roman is probably the much better striker, much more technical. He's got some solid takedown defense, stuff takedowns from Josh Fremd. Outside of that, he's fought he's fought Josh Fremd, Punahele Soriano, Alessio De Chirico, and Clayton Ribeiro. These are all not very good fighters. He's on a 4-fight winning streak, but against not fantastic fighters, and Anthony Hernandez is a very solid fighter, a very solid prospect in this middleweight division. Both of these guys are. I think Roman Kopylov, if he stuffs the takedowns, might not even be able to win this fight because there's something about these grapplers that continue to shoot takedowns, continue to threaten submissions, continue to threaten taking your back, that it doesn't matter if you can separate and stuff the takedowns. They'll be on you, pressuring you nonstop, and kind of drowning you the way that Merab Dvalishvili did against Petr Yan. I think Anthony Hernandez can have that type of a performance with landing more takedowns. I guess Merab did land 11 takedowns on Petr Yan, but I do think that Anthony Hernandez will be able to smother Roman Kopylov. And Roman Kopylov on the feet, it feels like he kind of picks his shots, right? He's very selective, lets the strikes come to him. But at the same time, I think that Anthony Hernandez is going to be so busy shooting takedowns and all of that on the feet, you have to respect his striking because Anthony Hernandez has some very solid power in his hands. I know Anthony Hernandez has got knocked out by a body shot before by Kevin Holland, and Roman Kopylov looks like a better striker than Kevin Holland at this point. But Anthony Hernandez doesn't have a chin issue. I do think he's going to be shooting nonstop. He's improved massively since that point. I think that was around 5 years ago. Damn, I am old. But Anthony Hernandez will shoot nonstop. I think he finds the takedowns. We've seen Roman Kopylov get taken down a while ago. I know this was earlier on in his career where he lost to Albert Duraev. and the other guy, Carl Roberson, took him down and submitted him in round 3. I think Anthony Hernandez pushes one of the better paces in the entire middleweight division. I think he'll find success later on in the rounds. I think he's, durable enough to survive. And I do think that although Roman Kopylov has very quick kicks, Anthony Hernandez can potentially catch some of these kicks and then work in some takedowns. What I don't like on the Anthony Hernandez side and why I'm not super confident in him outside of the factors that I've already mentioned is that he was getting touched up a little bit by Edmund Shabazian. Shabazian was landing some very clean shots, but even then, he's not even getting rocked, and then he's shooting in on takedowns, blasting him. He's got some pretty solid wrestling, like I mentioned, some very solid submissions, has submitted Rodolfo Vieira, survived some very bad positions on the ground against Rodolfo Vieira, has dealt with adversity before and came back from it. This guy's tough. I think he's fairly durable. If Roman Kopylov wins it, I think it'll be a body TKO. Obviously, a regular TKO is possible, but I think Anthony Hernandez can take a pretty clean shot. Very tough dude. I'm just saying, there's something about these grapplers that really shoot nonstop, that can smother their opponents. And against a guy like Roman Kopylov, who I do feel like kind of waits for the shot to come to him, really picks his shots very, very closely, and I don't think he's taking advantage of every living moment on the feet. I think this is where a guy like Anthony Hernandez can succeed. And it does feel like Roman Kopylov is the public underdog of the week. I've seen so many people picking Roman Kopylov, but he is a 2-1 underdog still. Put your money on him if you're really that confident on him. I'm just saying Anthony Hernandez presents a style that is so hard for strikers to deal with. And when we look at Petr Yan against Merab Dvalishvili, sure, Merab isn't the better striker and doesn't have the greatest takedowns, and he doesn't land every takedown, but he'll hold you in the clinch, and he'll push an insane pace and kind of tire out these strikers that try to pick their shots a little bit. I think this might be similar to that, but Anthony Hernandez is landing more takedowns and, finding better positions on the ground, being able to hold Roman Kopylov down better than Petr Yan, or it's better than Merab was holding down Petr Yan. And I'm not making a direct comparison because Anthony Hernandez does have a different style than Merab Dvalishvili. As far as his career, he's been better at taking down and holding down his opponents. He has better power on the feet. But when it comes down to it, it's these guys that push this insane pace that make me want to predict them. I like Roman. I would say I'm cheering for him, but I am picking Anthony Hernandez, and I think he's a pretty solid fighter as well. I'm really interested in this fight. I hope that whoever wins this looks like a very solid prospect and puts a lot of hype on their name. If Roman Kopylov does it, he likely makes it look very, very easy, but not only very easy, very impressive. Stuffing takedowns, separating. I don't think he'll be able to separate, like I mentioned, for reasons that I already said. Anthony Hernandez probably shoots up to 20 takedowns here. If he's not shooting up to 20 takedowns, that means he's getting takedown, holding down Roman Kopylov, or potentially finishing him on the ground. I know Roman Kopylov is fun, dude. I know he is. I almost want him to win, but I just want to see a very fun fight where someone looks like a very solid prospect. Super, super excited for this one. One of the more underrated fights on this card. If you're not super in the know with good MMA prospects, this is one to watch out for. A very good grappler versus a very good striker with a sambo base. Anthony Hernandez, round 3 submission is going to be the pick. I'm going to say like a 55% chance to win this one. I've got a pretty strong feeling that people are underestimating him and a little bit too high on the Roman Kopylov side, who hasn't taken on many great opponents. A lot of respect for him and Anthony Hernandez as well. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Merab Dvalishvili versus Henry Cejudo. I'm taking Merab, but I'm not as confident as a lot of other people are on the side of Merab. Henry Cejudo is a guy with solid takedown defense. If you don't know, he's a American National Wrestling Champion. He'll tell you about it. If you know who Henry Cejudo is, you probably know that just because you've seen him say it in interviews. But with that being said, he's got some solid takedown defense, and Merab doesn't have the greatest takedown entries, and he'll smother you with his pace, similarly to how I was mentioning with Anthony Hernandez in the last fight. Not exactly similar, but if you want to bring up Merab and his insane pace, he shot 49 takedowns against Petr Yan, only landed 11, didn't have that much control time. And Petr Yan was able to get back up to the feet multiple times, but overall he was smothered. Merab is so busy. I think he has the best cardio in the entire UFC. And against 37-year-old Henry Cejudo, or 38-year-old at this point, let me double check that for you guys. He is 37 years old. I think that Merab will be able to shoot in nonstop. Henry won't be able to separate. And if he does separate, Merab shooting right back in. Just watch that Petr Yan fight. That's all the reason I need to pick him against Henry Cejudo. I don't think Henry Cejudo is powerful enough to find the knockout, although he has power, has knocked out Dillashaw, other fighters in the past, Dominic Cruz, right? Merab has very solid chin recovery. He has a very solid chin in the first place, and on the feet, he has an annoying style where you got to respect him somewhat. He'll stalk you down and then immediately shoot in on a takedown. When it's within the clinch, he'll kind of threaten a takedown at times, so it's very hard to do damage in the clinch. Jose Aldo ran into this problem where he won the first round, but in rounds 2 and 3, Merab would hold him in the clinch, and right as Aldo might load up for a knee or even look for some strikes, Merab shooting it on a takedown, you have to defend the takedown, obviously, or you're going to get taken down. And then he's slowly working in the knees to the thigh, very slowly winning a decision. I think this might look like the Aldo performance. Fairly competitive because Merab won't do much damage, but I do think he'll get a couple of takedowns in here. Henry Cejudo was taken down by Aljamain Sterling recently. I don't think he's in the prime of his career. I think that's very apparent to see. I did think he lost to Aljamain Sterling. I think a lot of people thought, well, Henry Cejudo won that. You know, he's landing the more damaging shots. I think a large reason for why people thought those shots were so damaging is because there weren't super damaging shots at all within that fight. But if you go back and rewatch it, it wasn't like these massive knockout damaging blows to Aljamain Sterling. I think Aljamain Sterling did pretty fairly clearly outpoint him. Not super clearly where it's like you're completely dumb if you thought Henry Cejudo won, but if you thought he won, just rewatch it, tally up the strikes. I know it looked like he landed some very big shots, but I do thoroughly believe Aljamain Sterling did win that fight. I think Merab has a very tough style for anybody. I know it's 3 rounds, and that's why I'm not super high on the Merab side here. I'm giving him like a 55% chance to win this one. I'm not just saying that to cope. If Henry Cejudo does win this fight, I genuinely do believe that he has a good chance. If he stuffs the takedowns, which he has solid takedown defense, and he's busy within the clinch, which he has such a high fight IQ, which has been the reason why he's been a double champ throughout his career, been a wrestling champ throughout his career. It's because he has a high fight IQ, he has a love for the sport, and he watches a lot of film and knows his opponents so damn well. So he might just stuff the takedowns, turn around the clinch, and be landing knees on Merab and kind of flipping the script a little bit. I can see it definitely happening. The thing is, he's 37 years old, got taken down by Aljamain Sterling, and Merab is just not going to be someone that I'm picking against anytime soon. But in a 3-rounder, it massively benefits Henry Cejudo. If this is a 5-rounder, I'm giving Merab like a 70% chance to win this fight because I don't think anybody's going to be beating Merab in a 5-rounder. I mean, there's a couple of guys I think have a pretty solid chance, but that's for a different time. Merab 30-27 decision. I think a couple of the rounds will be... Actually, I'll say 29-28. I think Henry Cejudo does enough damage in the clinch in one of the rounds to have success. I think he'll be able to stuff a majority of the takedown, but to get taken down like 3-4 times, and that will be enough to sway the judges. But this could be as simple as this. They're clinching up for so much time, Henry Cejudo lands a fairly damaging shot in any of the rounds along with like 10 strikes, and that gives him the round. We saw Jose Aldo land like 10 strikes in round 1 and still clearly beat Merab. It's just because he doesn't do much damage, and there are opportunities to beat Merab, especially in a 3-rounder as we saw against Jose Aldo. I feel like I'm repeating myself at this point, but for the reasons that I previously stated, we're going with Merab, 29-28 decision. Not a very fun one, but I just can't pick against Merab and that insane pace, solid chin recovery, and I think he should get a title shot after this one, and I do think I will be picking him against Sean O'Malley or Marlon Vera. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Geoff Neal versus Ian Machado Garry. I'm going with Ian Machado Garry. A lot of people love Geoff Neal here. I get it. He hits hard, but in my opinion, he hasn't looked great in all of the performances throughout his career. There's been a couple where he looks good. He's landing big shots on Shavkat, who's a very solid striker, but there's also performances where he's just not being able to find the target. Against Santiago Ponzinibbio, he landed clean a couple times, still wasn't able to find the massive shots to put him away, really make it a very clean decision. I think a lot of people thought Santiago Ponzinibbio won, and Ponzinibbio is not the greatest striker ever. I don't think Geoff Neal is that technical. Sure, he's got a good jab, he's got some good straight punches, but he's a little bit slow, and I think the much quicker fighter here is Ian Garry. I know Ian Garry pulled out of his fight with Vicente Luque, but ultimately, he works a good jab, he works a good low kick, he's got a good teep to the body, he's got a good straight right, he's got some very good fundamental striking, he's very good at keeping range, he is much quicker than Geoff Neal, and although he's been clipped in almost every single one of his performances, and his striking defense isn't great, and I do think that he is pretty chinny. Brendan Allen mentioned in an interview that he has been knocked out in training, which probably goes along with what a lot of people are saying about him being chinny. He's got a very small chin, a very small head, and the way that it rests on his shoulders just makes it seem like this guy will get knocked out at some point of his career. I just don't think that this will be the case because we've seen Geoff Neal get slowly, very easily outpointed by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who doesn't have a very big power threat, much like Ian Garry. I know they are different, and Wonderboy Thompson has all these different karate looks, better kicks than Ian Garry, but Ian Garry has a nice high kick as well, some nice body kicks. I do think he's going to be able to maintain range. I like the big octagon for him here. If he gets clipped clean, he most definitely can get knocked out, and if he gets clipped the way that Kenan Song was able to clip him by Geoff Neal, he probably gets knocked out here, but I do think he's going to be able to maintain range and do better as the fight goes on because I think Geoff Neal's legs are very open to getting leg kicked. We saw this against Wonderboy Thompson. I think this could look very similar to that performance where Ian Garry is very clearly outclassing him, I think he does a very clear decision here, wins by 30-27, calls out Colby Covington, gets that fight on the co-main event of Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, and builds himself into a star at the UFC. Now, I'll tell you, if anyone's landing takedowns, it's probably going to be Geoff Neal. He's able to stuff a lot of takedowns against Belal Muhammad, against the other guy as well, and I'm trying to think of his damn name. It's Shavkat Rakhmonov. He stuffed takedowns from Shavkat Rakhmonov. Very solid takedown defense, which indicates he probably has some ability to wrestle offensively, and I think that might be the case here. But knowing Geoff Neal, he's a stand-up guy that likes to stand and bang. He did it against Vicente Luque. And something to mention, a very solid win that's aged very, very well is his win against Belal Muhammad, where he stuffed takedowns. And I think it was a 30-27 decision where he was landing big shots on Belal, hurting him all over the place. But that was pre-steroid Belal and pre-win streak Belal. So ultimately, Ian Garry, 30-27 is going to be the pick. I'm going to give him like a 60 to 65% chance to win this one. I feel fairly confident that he has the style and the speed and the athletic attributes to beat Geoff Neal here. I don't think he's got the greatest power, so I don't think he finds a KO here. It should be a Geoff Neal by KO or Ian Garry decision type of fight. But I've been wrong before. Maybe Ian Garry finds a KO, or maybe Geoff Neal hurts him a couple of times or enough on the feet to find the win by decision, like just wins a couple of the rounds based off of damage and landing the bigger shots. But I'm very confident that for a majority of this fight, Ian Garry will be winning. And I do think he'll win the entire thing for 3 rounds and stay away from the power of Geoff Neal. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa. I started out extremely confident on the Robert Whittaker side. When I say extremely, that's not saying like he's going to win, 80% chance. He's the lock of the century. No, but I was looking at the minus 210, minus 200 price tag, minus 180 at one point, and I was feeling pretty confident about it, and I was throwing him in a couple of parlays. But then you think about it, and I'm not just going to parallel this directly to the Dricus du Plessis side. I'm just going to look at this as, Paulo Costa, his most recent performances against Marvin Vettori and against Luke Rockhold sucked. They weren't good. He got outstruck by Marvin Vettori. He got taken down multiple times by Marvin Vettori. And against Luke Rockhold, he got taken down, and Luke Rockhold was having a lot of success against him, which is not something you want to see against Robert Whittaker, the technician, the guy with the good high kick. Anyways, the guy that a lot of people have been viewing as the guy that beats everyone better than Adesanya beats the best or the contenders in the championship fight. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, Robert Whittaker goes out there, schools Vettori. He goes out there, I'm trying to think of other fights now, but it's just not coming to my head. But Robert Whittaker is a guy that just looks so technically sound. He's got pretty solid head movement. His striking defense, for the most part, is pretty good. But his striking defense, although very good, it remains unhit a lot of his fights. When he does get clipped, he doesn't have the greatest chin, and it's not the most reliable. Now, I don't think Paulo Costa has the greatest power. He doesn't have Dricus du Plessis' level of power. He's never really flatlining anybody, but he did hurt Yoel Romero, which is something very insane to do because Yoel has an insane granite chin. But Yoel was able to recover and land a big shot back very, very quickly. I think Paulo Costa can find a knockout. I also think that he can win this by decision because he is so tough and he could potentially find takedowns. But I'm going to stay on the Robert Whittaker side because I do think that Dricus du Plessis really did have a very good style to beat Robert Whittaker. More of a power threat, arguably more of a grappling threat. Plus, he shot the takedown and at the end of round one, secured it, landed some big shots on the ground, and really imposed that grappling threat going into round two. Whereas maybe Paulo Costa shoots takedowns. I don't know if that's going to be the case. But part of the reason why Paulo Costa's performance against Luke Rockhold might have looked so bad is because it was at elevation. The same card as Usman versus Edwards 2, where Leon Edwards had that glorious head kick KO. I predicted Leon to win that fight. I felt like a genius, although Leon was looking pretty bad throughout the first 4 rounds. I guess the first round he won, but I actually picked Leon in the rematch after that because I saw the effects on the Salt Lake City environment and how all the fighters were gassing, looking the most sloppy they have ever looked in their entire life. So I picked him in the rematch for the title against Kamaru Usman, and I picked him twice. Anyways, what I'm trying to get at is I think the Salt Lake City cardio might have truly hindered the performance of Paulo Costa and made him look a lot more sloppy than he typically will look. But when you're getting walked down by Marvin Vettori, who has a much better chin than Robert Whittaker and could have been a large reason why he was having success, I still can't trust you because that's Marvin freaking Vettori, who's having a close striking fight with Roman Dolidze, who just got cooked by Nasruddin Imavov for 5 rounds. Nasruddin Imavov took it to him, landed big shots, nearly knocked him out. Marvin Vettori doesn't have a very good power threat, much like Robert Whittaker, and I do think that Robert Whittaker will struggle with these guys that are very physically imposing. And say what you want about Paulo Costa's power and his ability to put away some of the best fighters, you know what I'm saying, some of the guys with the better chins, the really tough, durable guys and whatnot, he will go out there and he has a bruising type of style on the feet. He's a bruiser. He'll go out there trying to physically impose his will. Whether or not he has the same type of power as Ngannou, he can still find a TKO here. And Robert Whittaker's chin isn't extremely reliable at this point in his career, as he has taken a lot of damage. I'm picking Robert Whittaker because I think he can find takedowns. He took down Dricus du Plessis, which is something pretty solid. And when we look at what Dricus du Plessis landed on Robert Whittaker, it's because he was switching stances. I do think that was something that Robert Whittaker has struggled with throughout his career, especially that switch stance jab where where DDP switched stances and landed that southpaw jab. You know who else did that? Cannonier in round 3 against Robert Whittaker, which actually had Robert Whittaker rocked at the end of round 3. As soon as Jared Cannonier switched stances and threw that southpaw jab, he rocked him. That tells me that maybe switching stances is going to be something that has a lot of success against Robert Whittaker. And DDP is a guy that was really good at that, showing him a bunch of new looks in 3 rounds, massively favored DDP there. Paulo Costa, I don't think hits as hard as DDP. I don't think will have the same level of a grappling threat that DDP imposed in that first round. And I think Robert Whittaker will maintain range if he's going in there looking for a finish, which is why I'm not very confident in Robert Whittaker, because I'm seeing him in interviews saying, I'm looking for the kill, I want the finish. That's where he can get caught. That's where he trades in the pocket a little bit and then gets caught with the big fat hook from Paulo Costa, and then the flurry begins. I don't think he's going to flatline Robert Whittaker. I think it's going to take a long, accurate flurry of very big, powerful punches that Paulo Costa is loading up to finish Robert Whittaker, but I've seen worse. He could potentially flatline him. I just don't want Rob pushing for the finish. I need him to realize how tough of a matchup this potentially is for him, especially if Paulo Costa is shooting takedowns. But I think if Robert Whittaker does get hurt, he can always shoot the takedown. He can always work the jab. I think DDP obviously is now champion, has been proven to be a very solid fighter that a lot of people were underrating. And I think Paulo Costa, his recent performances aren't anything that's going to lead me to want to pick him over Robert Whittaker. Just because Robert Whittaker got knocked out once throughout his career. I know he's been knocked out before, but just because he got knocked out by DDP doesn't mean he's complete dog shit now. Now, if Paulo Costa bruises his way to a victory, I'm not going to be entirely surprised. I'm going to say Robert Whittaker, 55% chance to win. And that leads us to move on to the main event of UFC 298. This is so much fun. In my opinion, this is the most interesting and the best fight in the entire UFC. And I'm taking the underdog in Ilia Topuria, but I understand why you want to take Alexander Volkanovski. I'm not going to sit here and say Ilia Topuria is getting this shit done. I think there are reasons to pick both sides. And when you look at Alexander Volkanovski, he is one of the hardest guys in the entire UFC to pick against. And it's taken me some self-control not to pick Alexander Volkanovski and ride on the train of the old horse who's taken me to victory multiple times before. Against Max Holloway in the third fight, I had the biggest bet of my lifetime, which isn't very big compared to a lot of people, but I bet 300 smackaroos on that guy, and he came through. I was very confident in him on that fight. I think I've been very good at predicting Alexander Volkanovski throughout his career, and when it comes to this fight, there are certain factors that I really love on the Ilia Topuria side. I'm not saying Ilia is a lock, but just when it comes down to it, Alexander Volkanovski is now 35 or 36 years old. Let me actually double check this. I want to make sure I get this right. He's 35 years old. Ilia Topuria is now 27. And if anyone is going to be regressing physically, it's clearly Volkanovski, who's coming off a first-round head kick KO loss to Islam Makhachev. Not only that, I guarantee you that weight cut to lightweight on 10 days short notice was horrible. I was watching a lot of Alexander Volkanovski's YouTube videos on the fight week buildup, and he was saying, yeah, this is probably going to be a tough weight cut for me. If you look at his post-weigh-in interview, the ones that they do right after they make weight, he looked really drained. He didn't seem like he was in the best of spirits. Well, I mean, he seemed like he was in good spirits, but he didn't seem like he was the most comfortable. The dude looked like he needed a couple damn glasses of water. I'll tell you this much. A rough weight cut is already very hard on the brain, even if he didn't get knocked out. Now he's getting knocked out, and it was where he got head kick KO'd, and then he was out cold, and then Islam Makhachev landed some follow-up shots. When you're out cold, getting follow-up shots landed on you, it feels like those are the type of KOs that can alter careers. At the age of 35, although Volk hasn't taken so much damage throughout his career, he's taken a fair bit. Dropped a couple times against Max Holloway, dropped by Chad Mendes, obviously knocked out by Islam Makhachev, hurt a couple times by Islam Makhachev. It does concern me. Now he's 35. When you suffer a KO like that, it can not only just ruin your chin, it can ruin other things about your fight. There's so many fights where, not so many fights, but there's so many scenarios where we've seen fighters come back from a very brutal loss very early, not only get chinned, but just look slower than normal, not look as athletically prepared as normal. It's such a brutal thing, and I do think that it's not something that I'm going to be able to trust, because people keep bringing up, oh, well, Alexander Volkanovski is the outlier. He's the old guy that's been beating all these younger guys. I think the record's 15-6 for title fights where the older guy ends up losing to the younger guy. That means the younger guy wins 15 out of the 21 times. But what is the statistics for when that older guy is coming off a KO loss? It's probably 0-0. I don't know if there's a scenario for that for the title, but you are now increasing Ilia Topuria's power by making that decision you did at UFC 294. I don't think people are realizing that, right? It's not just that Ilia Topuria could have already knocked him out if this was a regular camp. Volkanovski didn't get knocked out, and I still would have been massively considering Ilia Topuria. But it's the fact that, number one, coming off that knockout loss, he might look a little bit more slow. And Ilia Topuria has very quick, powerful, and accurate hands. And we have seen Volkanovski again hit multiple times throughout his career. Chad Mendes dropped him. Chad Mendes had a takedown threat, and not only that, he had a very similar frame to Ilia Topuria. And Ilia Topuria, much better with his counters. And the thing about Ilia Topuria's counters is they're not just like one nice pull counter. I mean, obviously that's something nice, and he does have that to his arsenal, but it's very hard to counter his counters similarly to how Alexander Volkanovski did to Islam Makhachev, where he would draw out a feint, or he would feint at Islam Makhachev, draw out a counter, and then counter that, if that makes sense. I guess that really was just making sense by me saying counter the counters. But Ilia Topuria will counter you with long, strung-out combinations in the matter of seconds. His hands are quick, and every single strike he throws is very powerful, even if he doesn't put all of his power on it. He's got a nice jab, although his leg is there to get chewed up, and his stance is very lead leg heavy. He's talked about how he knows the leg kicks are coming. He's acknowledged that. I think he will have a game plan going into this fight where he tries to address the leg kicks. If not, he's going out there like a madman looking for the KO early. We have seen him go 5 rounds. We have seen him take very tough shots against guys like Jai Herbert, I guess just Jai Herbert, but Jai Herbert landed a head kick on him that would have knocked out a lot of lightweights and a lot of featherweights, if not almost all of them. And on the regional scene, he's been caught with the head kick before. I do think that's a hole in his game that maybe Yair Rodriguez exposes, but I do think he'd beat Yair Rodriguez because he has the grappling prowess over him. If you don't know about Ilia Topuria's grappling, he's a Greco-Roman wrestling base, which is, I guess, a different style of wrestling that Volk might not be really well adapted to. I do imagine that Volk has been introduced to a lot of Greco-Roman type of sweeps, trips, whatever it might be, but it's a different style of wrestling, and sometimes these different styles of wrestling present different challenges that these guys with very solid traditional takedown defense get taken down at times, get caught off guard. I don't think Ilia's going to land takedowns. I think Volk does have very solid takedown defense, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying it's possible. And when it comes to the ground, Ilia Topuria is a BJJ black belt. I think he's a pretty high-level one. He's been a BJJ black belt for as long as I could remember, at least before the Ryan Hall fight, maybe ever since he's been in the UFC. He TKO'd Brian Hall, who has a very solid submission threat, more of a submission threat than Alexander Volkanovski, and he was taken down by Bryce Mitchell, but when he was taken down, he scrambled back up to the feet. I think Volk can take him down, but you do have to be worrying about the fact that when you shoot a takedown against Ilia Topuria, you're getting in very close range, and he is very good at landing shots off the break. Against Josh Emmett, there was a moment where Emmett shot in on the clinch. Ilia Topuria framed off and kind of pushed him into a strike. He's very good at manipulating your weight, pushing you into finding, obviously, his power shots off the break, as I just mentioned and repeated right there. I don't know why. But I'm trying to mention all the points that I want to mention. Tomorrow I'm going to have a video breaking down this fight a little bit more in depth. But I'm going to pick round 2 TKO. I don't want to say round 1 KO. That feels a little bit disrespectful, but I think he'll find a big shot in round 1 or have a successful moment that makes it either a close round, potentially wins him the round, and then round 2 he'll come out a little bit more confident, pressuring Volk, and then he'll counter Volk's counter. That's annoying to say. Not counter Volk's counter, but he'll be pressuring Volk after shooting a takedown. I think shooting a takedown will work wonders for him because not only will that pose a grappling threat, but it will set up the feet. The fucking hands on the feet. What am I saying, dude? I think shooting a takedown, let me dumb this down so I can talk and speak correctly, will open up his hands on the feet, similarly to how we have seen a lot of grapplers who might not be better strikers than some of the strikers they have beaten on the feet, but because of their takedown threat, they'll have success. And it's not like Ilia Topuria, not like Volkanovski can just take or shake off the takedown threat from Ilia Topuria, because Topuria is a very well-acclimated grappler who started out grappling with his career and then developed sick, wicked hands. He's got pretty solid head movement, shoulder rolls with a lot of shots. I don't see Volkanovski KOing him earlier. If he KOs him, it's going to be a long flurry of punches where he lands a big shot. And Volk does have some good power, but if they're trading in the pocket, I'm clearly favoring Ilia. I'm clearly favoring Ilia's chin in this matchup, as Volkanovski is now cutting down to 145 after that rough weight cut to 155, after getting head kick KO by Islam Makhachev. If we're talking about the mentality type of thing, I know Volk seems very confident in all of his interviews, but there's got to be some sliver of doubt here when he sees people asking, do you regret this fight against Islam Makhachev? And do you think that you're returning a little bit too early against Ilia Topuria? People are going to be saying this nonstop in every single interview that Volkanovski has here. I'm really excited for this fight, guys. I am so damn excited. I'm trying to mention any other factors that I didn't mention that I didn't want to. Obviously, I'll have the video tomorrow out breaking this fight down more in depth. But in the Josh Emmett performance, it was shown that he had 5 rounds of cardio, and he was able to place his shots. And this is going to be a hot take. I think Ilia Topuria's performance was more impressive than Yair Rodriguez's performance over Josh Emmett. Sure, Yair Rodriguez finished Josh Emmett, but he also got rocked and he got taken down. And Josh Emmett basically tried to get himself into a triangle choke. That's what it looked like. Credit to Yair, but I want to say this. Ilia dominated that whole fight from bell to bell to bell to bell to bell. And he knocked him down multiple times. And I do think that if his main primary goal in that fight was to finish Josh Emmett, he would have done it. But he didn't. He was very patient and he stuck to a game plan. And that fight alone showed to me that Ilia Topuria has a game plan. And he's not that dumb of a fighter, although he comes across very arrogant, saying that he's going to knock out Volk in the first round. I do think that he has a game plan. I do think that he knows the threats of Alexander Volkanovski. He's been preparing for Alexander Volkanovski for such a long time now. And although Volk is very good at keeping range with his jab, that reach is going to work wonders for him. And that low kick is beautiful. And he's actually very good at throwing that low kick while kind of leaning back, similar to Alex Pereira. Obviously, Pereira throws such a unique kick that no one really throws a kick like it outside of the guys that train with him. But he throws it and he keeps his body very far back, so it makes it very hard to counter his leg kicks, if that makes sense. Alex Pereira leans back, throws his leg kick back, but he's got his hands up. And since he's so far leaned back, it's just hard to find the range and the timing to counter the leg kicks, as I just repeated. So anyways, my pick's going to be Ilia Topuria. I think round 2 KO. I think Volk's going to be looking for a shot as Ilia Topuria is pressuring, and Ilia is going to be able to pressure because he shoots a takedown and potentially finds a couple of big shots. But as Volk's looking for like maybe a straight right off the back foot or a jab, he's going to slip on the inside, land a 3-punch combination, drop Volk. Volk's going to get back up and have a TKO up against the cage. I think he becomes the next superstar of the featherweight division. It feels written in the stars. I'm a big fan of both of these guys. They are both of my top 5 favorite fighters. It's going to be fun to see them win and also sad to see the other guy lose. I know Ilia Topuria is very cocky and not a lot of people like him, but his style is so much fun to watch. And I know Volk is a really hard guy to pick against. When you look at his resume, Holloway 3 times. Crazy, right? Brian Ortega, I mean, solid win. I don't think Brian Ortega is the best. Yair Rodriguez, pretty solid win. His fight against Islam Makhachev, the first fight, was crazy, and then obviously he got knocked out by Islam Makhachev recently. Against TKZ, I'll bring this fight up too. He didn't really get caught with anything clean, but there were moments where TKZ was close to landing pretty big shots, where that is Ilia Topuria, who's much quicker, much better with the counters, much more accurate with his hands, much more powerful, then it could be a different story. And Ilia Topuria, on top of all that, will have a takedown threat. If he shoots takedowns, I think he'd be done not to, even if he doesn't get it. I did want to mention this. I think Alexander Volkanovski can find takedowns, and when Ilia is off of his back, he probably doesn't have much for Alexander Volkanovski because he has such good submission defense. I don't think Volk's going to end up submitting Ilia, and I don't think Ilia is going to end up submitting Volk unless Ilia hurts Volk prior to, obviously, submitting him. But I think when it comes to just like non-getting hurt, that makes no sense. But I think we're not going to see a submission unless a fighter, depending on Ilia or Alexander Volkanovski, is being beaten or battered. I cannot speak right now, but you know what I'm getting at there. I don't think we're going to see a submission in this matchup. I think Volk can find success if he finds the takedowns, but he does have to be very cautious of Ilia Topuria, maybe even throwing an uppercut while he is shooting it on the takedown, or when Ilia Topuria stuffs the takedowns, where Ilia Topuria is going to be able to pressure upon the break, find big shots off the break. Ilia Topuria, round 2 KO is the pick. As I said multiple times now, really excited for this fight. Make sure to tune into my video tomorrow. Let me know what you guys are thinking. I can see the Alexander Volkanovski side. I think I can argue both sides very well, as I will do in my video tomorrow. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let's make some money, and I'll see you in the next one.